listening to the podcast for learning the language of A Course in Miracles so you can understand the meaning, embody the message, and live the teachings as a way of life. Welcome to episode 3 of this podcast. I'm your host, Reverend Jennifer McSween, creator of this podcast and the Course in Miracles practice coach for taking those who are studying the Course from inspiration to application. On this week's episode, I'm going to talk about the most central idea in A Course in Miracles that sets it apart from all other teachings of this nature, and that is the Course's idea of the world as an illusion. This, by the way, is also one of the ideas with which we struggle the most as Course students. We find it very difficult to reconcile the seemingly real objects and people we see and encounter every moment and the equally real effects they seem to have on us and in our lives, with the Course's teaching that says they are all illusory. In last week's episode 2, I talked about the metaphysical framework in which the Course is written and the necessity of respecting that framework in order to better understand what the Course is really saying, so we can then apply what it's teaching on a practical level. Well, this is a prime example of the necessity of respecting the Course's metaphysical framework to understand one of its most fundamental ideas. You see, the reason why we struggle or find it difficult to reconcile what we see and encounter in the world with what we're being taught in the Course is because we're not respecting that framework, primarily because we're very often not aware of the metaphysical framework. Within the context of metaphysics, what is real is consciousness. One unified state of awareness consisting of nothing but ideas, or as the Course says it, mind is all there is. So everything is really taking place in the mind. And what this means is that everything we see and encounter in any form is nothing but the projection of the contents, the ideas in the mind, and is therefore an illusion. But when we hold the perspective of the world, when we're not aware of the metaphysical context or perspective, and we hold the perspective of the world that sees the world as real, we will have great difficulty seeing it as anything but real, or experiencing anything that takes place as unreal. A good analogy to which we can all relate for understanding what the Course means by the idea of the world as an illusion is that of going to the movies. When we go to the movies, we sit in the theater with a large screen in front of us and on which we see objects and people and different sceneries, and everything and everyone is animated and animating and acting and passing in front of our eyes as the story or the drama unfolds. Right? And we get fully involved in the storyline. We have our favorite characters and our favorite scenes. We cry, we laugh, or we get riled up, depending on what is taking place on the screen in front of us. Everything appears to be very, very real, and we're heavily invested in the experience. However, if we were to approach the screen and attempt to touch or take a hold of one of the objects or people on the screen, we would find there is no substance to any of it. There is literally nothing there. Nothing but the reflection of an image projected onto the screen. Because all that is really taking place is that at the back of the theater, in the projectionist booth, there is a projector pointed towards the screen in front of you, and a reel of film with hundreds of images is being run or passed through the projector at an extremely rapid rate. And because of the rapidity at which the images pass through the projector, they appear on the screen to be moving, animating, and interacting with each other. So what is real in this case is the images on the reel of film. And what you see unfolding on the screen in front of you is nothing but an illusion, an illusory image projected from the reel of film. So from the Course's perspective, that sees what is real, R-E-A-L, as the mind and what takes place in it, the world and what seems to take place in the world is therefore an illusion. Simply because if mind is all there is, and there is nothing else, and everything takes place in the mind because there is nowhere else, what we see and experience is taking place in the world outside us and in our lives, in all the myriad forms, is nothing but the projection of ideas within the mind onto the screen of the mind, or as we would say in the world, onto the screen of consciousness. Same thing. This, by the way, also applies to the body with which you identify as who you are. The body is nothing but an illusion because it is the form, a form in which you see and experience yourself. And your true self, like everything else, is an idea in the mind. Now, when you entertain the Course's perspective, you will realize that all that is ever really taking place in our different encounters and experiences in the world is that we're experiencing the ideas in the mind in different forms. This is what the Course means when it says the world is an illusion. And what this means for us on a practical level is that we're never really at risk or in danger at any point or at any time. Isn't that great news? How we apply or live this teaching on a daily basis without being in denial or without just repeating the words like an affirmation, hoping to change what we experience by what we say, is by respecting the metaphysical framework of the Course that puts the world within this context. That is, looking at it from the perspective that says, mind is all there is. You are an idea in the mind. All that is ever taking place is that you're experiencing the ideas in the mind in different forms, and ideas can neither hurt nor be hurt. So what do you have to fear? This perspective helps you realize that it's not what you see or encounter that determines the way you experience the world or anything that takes place in your life or in the world, but the context within which you are looking at the world. Look at it as if it were real, R-E-A-L. You will be subject to it. See it as an illusion, and you will never feel victimized by anything that takes place in it. Because regardless of the different forms you encounter and experience, you will realize or be aware that it is all just an illusion. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the podcast for understanding the language of A Course in Miracles. And again, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review, subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and please invite your friends to listen. Have a great week, and see you on the podcast next Wednesday.